Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Operation Freedom Briefings. The goal of these briefings and my weekly radio show, Operation Freedom, is to provide you information the bought-off lamestream fake media will not touch. You can join us every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern. The show is live and it's free. All you have to do is go to davejanda.com, hit the upper right-hand corner, hit the listen button. Great guests, great analysis. Hope you'll join us. In addition, we're available on this YouTube channel 24/7, and we're also available on davejanda.com. We have the free side, the public side, where we upload information on a regular basis. Also have the subscription side, I believe one of the biggest bangs for the buck in all of the internet, 30 cents a day, $9 a month. Hope you'll join our Freedom family. Extra content, extra shows, extra analysis, more in-depth, deep dissections. Today I want to talk about the deep state censorship model and dissect it a bit. I promised you last week that I was going to present you some information we did on an experiment we did on this YouTube channel this past week, and we're going to do that. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk about how the deep state utilizes and how their business model of censorship. How do they implement it? Well, a couple things. They focus on choke points. Now, initially, when I first started to deal with what's called mainstream media back in the 80s and 90s, I came across some folks that were very honest in the media at that point. But over time, those folks have become very disillusioned and the vast majority of them actually left. And the reason is because back then in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, there were certain individuals that worked what are called choke points. And it was usually at the editorial level, that the individuals that were seated there by the deep state the information would come funneling down into them, and then they would choke it if it was information that was deleterious to the deep state. And they were also purveyors of information that was disinformation, misinformation to get to the general public to promote what the deep state wanted to promote, the agenda. The lamestream media now, some people still think of it as the mainstream media, has become one huge choke point. Okay? It's completely co-opted. I don't care who. And that includes Fox. That includes Fox. All those media companies, all the mainstream media companies, just think of like you're walking into a Baskin-Robbins ice cream store. They're all just variations they're different flavors, but they're all the same. They're all ice cream. They're all owned and operated by the deep state. And this is why the alternative media is so important, because the alternative media tries to get you around those choke points. Now, one of the ways of which those of us in the alternative media try to get information out is on social media platforms. So we have our own websites, which obviously there aren't any choke points there. But when we start to go into the social media realm, and I don't deal with Facebook. I mean, Paul Rosenberg, who's a regular guest on our show, has been since the inception of Operation Freedom in October 2010, from the very beginning said, Facebook's a front. Forget it. Don't go there. Now, I do use Twitter to get some information out, and I do use YouTube, here, this platform. Now, there are choke points in the social media platforms, very similar to the way the mainstream media was back in the 80s and 90s. They're not completely co-opted, but there are certain points in social media that act as choke points. And this is one of the things that we're working on in Operation Freedom to identify. So, censorship by the deep state uses choke points in social media, such as in YouTube, on Twitter. And Facebook is just, I consider that part of that, essentially part of the bought-off lamestream fake media. It's one huge choke point. In addition, the deep state uses organizations to discredit individuals and organizations in the freedom movement. And I did a video recently about the Poynter Institute that identified 500, if you will, unreliable entities. This was a list compiled by an individual at a small college that had a web page that is non-existent. It's blank. And essentially this assistant professor of media studies, utilized information from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it was written by an individual who was employed by the Southern Poverty Law Center, but was under the domain, if you will, of something called the Poynter Institute, which is supposedly this hub of journalistic integrity. Come to find out that it's funded by globalists, including George Soros. They identified 500 organizations, of which DaveJanda.com was one of them, that they termed to be unreliable. When we pushed them on that, they had no evidence. They never had contacted us. They actually pulled the list. They pulled the articles and the like. But it shows you the business model, because the plan, I believe, was to finger the 500 organizations, such as the Daily Caller, a Judicial Watch, in addition to us and a number of 500 organizations. They wanted to get to us early so that they could shut the flow of information off to you well before the 2020 election. I believe the plan was to get this information out, and if it wasn't for Breitbart News that found what was going on, I don't think any of us would have been aware until possibly it would have been too late, because I think the plan was to put this article out, let it hang there for about a week or two, and then all of a sudden have their tentacles in the bought-off lamestream fake media, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, PBS, Washington Post, New York Times, you name it, all come in with one huge story at once to blow all 500 of us off our platforms. Well, because Breitbart picked it up, undermined that censorship activity. So they use choke points in social media now. They still have their lamestream media, but again, that's one huge choke point. They use organizations to discredit those of us in the alternative media trying to get information out to the American public and to the world public. But they also use disinformation agents. And let me tell you something. What's happening this week with Robert Mueller and these dweebs in Congress, on both sides of the aisle, by the way, they are nothing more than disinformation agents owned and operated by the deep state, and they're used to discredit the freedom movement through spreading falsehoods, misinformation, disinformation, and character assassination. And if you don't believe me, just watch the goat rodeo that's occurring this week with Robert Mueller. Now, we did a little bit of a experiment last week. 2 weeks ago, I uploaded a video, the 7 pieces of information the deep state don't want you to know, and Jeffrey Epstein. He was in the title. And that video was completely demonetized. Okay, so there are several things they can do on a social media platform to censor you. They can block notifications of your content being posted. A number of you have written to me and told me that that's occurring. They can make it so that your videos are no longer in the recommendations list. A number of you have emailed me, contacted me, told me that's also the case with our videos. And the other thing they can do is they can what's called demonetize you. So it took us 15 months to get monetization on YouTube. In other words, to allow ads to run. Now, the amount of money you get is not a huge amount of money, but it's amount of money that we can use to defray our production costs, our studio time for our radio show and the like. And it's very, very helpful. And it allows us to have the time to be able to do these YouTubes free of charge. Well, one of the things we started to find is that when I started to post the Benghazi videos, they were getting limited to no monetization. So obviously that struck a nerve in the deep state. For example, the interviews with Charles Woods and Nick No and Josh Salmon and the whistleblowers. The deep state did not like those. In addition, on July 9th, I posted that video, the 7 pieces of information the deep state don't want you to know, and Jeffrey Epstein. It was immediately demonetized. And the question in my mind was, is it because I had Epstein in the title and spoke about Epstein and intelligence agencies like the CIA, Mossad, and MI6 being behind him, essentially Jeffrey Epstein being a front? Or was it about the fact that I spoke about pedophile networks? So we did a little experiment. And the next week, and normally I videotape the YouTube presentations on Mondays, and then they're always posted Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. If you don't want to rely on the notifications, Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. I usually upload a new YouTube video. Well, I last week I did a 20-minute video entitled "President Trump's Secret Weapon Against the Deep State." I uploaded it Monday afternoon, and it immediately demonetized. Limited monetization blocked. Frankly, I was upset. I was pissed. Because one of the things we do at Operation Freedom, we have a great IT team, and they run linguistic scrapes, analyses on the videos we do to make sure there isn't anything that could be taken out of context with hate speech or violence. Okay, that video was completely clean, yet it was still demonetized. It did not violate the standards of YouTube. So I contacted our IT team, and they said, let's run an experiment here. What did you talk about? And I said, well, in the first part, I talked about President Trump's peace initiatives that actually involved four-legged pigs. And in the second part, I spoke about the two-legged pig, Epstein, the CIA, the Mossad, and MI6, as well as pedophile networks. They go, okay, let's split it in two. Let's do an experiment. We know it. You already tried to upload it once, and it was blocked. Let's split it in two, and we did. And we entitled the first part, President Trump's Secret Weapon for Peace, and part two, President Trump's Secret Weapon versus the Deep State. And in that, I speak about Epstein, the intelligence agencies, and pedophile networks. Part one, immediately green-lighted monetization. Part two, just when we uploaded it, blocked. Demonetized, limited monetization. So obviously, they're scraping the videos, and there is censorship there. Now, do I believe all of YouTube and Google are co-opted? I've done some inquiries into some people very, very networked in the IT world. And what I get back is that no, we do not believe that the entirety of YouTube and Google have become one huge choke point like the bought-off lamestream fake media. What I have been told is they believe there are certain players at certain choke points that are deep state players that are involved in censorship. And that's what we're dealing with. So I passed on our findings to individuals that are very networked in the IT world. And let's see what happens in these social media platforms, because we have provided them evidence of, in particular with our videos, of how they're being censored. And let's see what transpires. Now, to those of you that think that this is all conspiracy theory, I take you to something called Operation Mockingbird, which was the CIA's plan and program to infiltrate the media back in the 40s and 50s. This is written by Kara Goldfarb back in 2018. What was Operation Mockingbird? It was an alleged large-scale project undertaken by the CIA beginning in the 50s, as early as the late 40s, in which they recruited American journalists into a propaganda network. The recruited journalists were put on a payroll by the CIA and instructed to write fake stories and promoted the views of the intelligence agency. Student cultural organizations and magazines were allegedly funded as fronts for this operation. Operation Mockingbird expanded later on in order to influence foreign media as well. And many people believe Operation Mockingbird has been deep-sixed, that it is in mothballs. I do not believe that. I believe these choke points throughout all of the bought-off lamestream fake media. And let's face it, the CIA is part of the deep state. It's a huge part of the deep state. And these individuals are still present all across the board in the bought-off lamestream fake media, so-called mainstream media, but they are at critical choke points in social media. And they're the ones that when you mention Epstein, so this will be demonetized, Epstein, pedophile networks, intelligence agencies, boink, you're cut off. You're not put up on the recommended list. And subscribers start being dropped off. Based on the information I have, this is not it is not a pervasive process within social media, although it is present. And the key is pulling out those individuals that are at choke points that are doing the censoring. So these social media platforms, I can tell you through us, are aware. So if this continues, obviously it goes higher than the choke points and up into management. Unless anybody think the CIA would be involved in something like this. Remember the quote from Mike Pompeo, who's our current Secretary of State, but had been the director of the CIA. Headline from Zero Hedge, quote, this is from a speech he gave at Texas A&M University this past spring. Quote, I was a CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole, end quote. Ooh. Mike Pompeo spoke at Texas A&M University in April of 2019. Texas A&M University, itself long known for being a favored recruiting ground for the CIA, considering, too, that one of the university's last presidents, Robert Gates, was CIA chief and later served as Bush and Obama's Secretary of Defense. During the question and answer section, Pompeo boasted that in the CIA, both the training and culture are geared toward the following, quote, we lied, we cheated, we stole, end quote. We also had some incredible testimony in front of Congress this week by a Dr. Epstein, not related to Jeffrey Epstein, Robert Epstein, well-known research scientist, psychologist, American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology. He actually had voted for Hillary Clinton, sees himself on the left. Here's just a portion of his testimony. Data I've collected since 2016 show that Google displays content to the American public that is biased in favor of one political party. A party I happen to like. Not me, him, the left. But that's irrelevant. No private company should have either the right or the power to manipulate large populations without their knowledge. In 2016, based on search results generated by Google's search algorithm, likely impacted undecided voters in a way that gave at least 2.6 to 10.4 million votes to Hillary Clinton, as he stated, whom I supported, not him, he. On Election Day in 2018, the Go Vote reminder Google displayed on its homepage gave one political party between 800,000 and 4.6 million more votes than it gave the other party. In the weeks leading up to the 2018 election, bias in Google's search results may have shifted to upwards of 78.2 million votes to the candidates of one political party, spread across hundreds of local and regional races. So the question is, and we will also be investigating this, is this because the bought-off lamestream fake media, that's one huge choke point, pays money for placement of their content, and this is why the results reported by Dr. Epstein are as they are? Or is this an internal bias, and is this an internal choke point that's being created by the Googleites, let's call them? More on that to follow. Now let's talk about the other Epstein. Why not? We're going to be demonetized anyway. This from Philip Giraldi from the American Herald Tribune. Yes, I know you're not going to hear Shep Smith talk about this. By the way, keep your antenna up about Shep Smith. Giraldi, did pedophile Jeffrey Epstein work for Mossad? Oh. The extent of Israeli spying directed against the United States is a huge story that is only rarely addressed in the mainstream media. In particular, I'm referring to Jeffrey Epstein now, the billionaire Wall Street, quote, financier, end quote, who has been arrested and charged with operating a vast network of underage girls for sex, operating out of the mansions in New York City and Florida, as well as his private island in the Caribbean, referred to by visitors as Orgy Island or some people as Pedophile Island, also named as Little St. James Island. He also owns Big St. James Island. Among other high-value associates, it is claimed that Epstein was particularly close to Bill Clinton, imagine that, who flew dozens of times on Epstein's private 727, dubbed the Lolita Express, where minors were, of course, present. Take a look at our previous video, part 2. We get into that. I go on. This is, again, Philip Giraldi from the American Herald Tribune. Epstein's crimes were carried out in his $56 million Manhattan mansion, and in his oceanside villa in Palm Beach, Florida, both residents were equipped with hidden cameras and microphones in the bedrooms, which Epstein reportedly used to record sexual encounters between his high-profile guests and his other underage girls, many of whom came from poor backgrounds who were recruited by procurers, can you say Ghislaine Maxwell, remember that name, to engage in what was euphemistically described as, quote, massages for money, end quote. The Democrats are calling for an investigation of the Epstein affair, but they might well wind up regretting their demands. Bill and Hillary Clinton were, however, very close associates of Epstein. Bill Clinton, who flew on the Lolita Express, that 727 jet, at least 26 times, some people say 27, by the way, could plausibly be implicated in the pedophilia given his track record and relative lack of conventional morals. Also, Hillary, 6 trips, as I understand it, on the Lolita Express. On many of the trips, Bill refused Secret Service agents and escorts who would have been witnesses of any misbehavior. On one lengthy trip to Africa in 2002, Bill and Jeffrey were accompanied by accused pedophile actor Kevin Spacey and a number of young girls, scantily clad employees, identified only as Massage. Epstein was also a major contributor to, the Clinton Foundation. In fact, at one point, he said he was one of the founders of the Clinton Global Initiative, by the way. And his attorney also made that claim. And was present at the wedding of, I believe Ghislaine Maxwell was, at Chelsea Clinton. How special. You know, that wedding that was paid for by the funds that were donated to help the people in Haiti. Right. How special. Selective inquiries into wrongdoing, to include intense finger-pointing, are the name of the game in Washington, and the affair Epstein also has all the hallmarks of a major espionage case. Ding, ding, ding. Possibly, again, Giraldi saying this, tied to Israel. Unless Epstein is an extremely sick pedophile who enjoys watching films of other men having sex with 12-year-old girls, the whole filming procedure smacks of a sophisticated intelligence service compiling material to blackmail prominent politicians and other public figures. Ding, ding, ding. Those blackmailed would undoubtedly, in most cases, cooperate with the foreign government involved to avoid a major scandal. It's called recruiting, quote, remember this term, you'll hear it down the line, agents of influence, end quote. That is how intelligence agencies work, and it is what they do. That Epstein was perceived as being intelligence linked was made clear in Acosta's comments, that's former Secretary of Labor Acosta, during his transition team interview. When being cleared by that team, he was asked, quote, is the Epstein case going to cause a problem during the confirmation hearings? Acosta had explained that back in the day when he was a prosecutor, he had just one meeting on the Epstein case. He'd cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he had been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. Quote, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, end quote. Questions about Epstein's wealth front also suggest a connection with secret government agencies with deep pockets. The New York Times, no less, reports that, quote, exactly what was his money management operation did was cloaked in secrecy, as were most of the names of whomever he did it for. He claimed to work for a number of billionaires, but the only known major client was Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of several retail chains, including The Limited and Victoria's Secret. Epstein's contact with Israeli intelligence service may have plausibly come through his association with, Ghislaine Maxwell, who didn't fall far from her father's tree, who allegedly serve as his key procurer of young girls. Ghislaine is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who died or possibly was assassinated in mysterious circumstances in 1991. Maxwell was a, quote, businessman, very cosmopolitan in profile like Epstein, a multimillionaire who was very controversial with what were regarded as ongoing ties to Mossad, Israeli intelligence. After his death, he was given a state funeral by Israel in which 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence listened while Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir eulogized, quote, he has done more for Israel that can today be said, end quote. According to Giraldi, Mossad would have exploited Epstein's contacts, arranging their cooperation by having Epstein wining and dining them while flying them off to exotic locations, providing them with women and entertainment. If they refused to cooperate, it would be time for blackmail, photos, and videos of the sex with underage women. Giraldi concludes, it will be very interesting to see how far and how deep the investigation into Epstein and his activities go. One can expect that efforts will be made to protect top politicians like Clinton and even Trump, because Trump had some loose affiliations with him, threw him out of the club in Mar-a-Lago 15 years ago, but still had some interactions with him in the early 90s, none of which involved President Trump or Citizen Trump going to Pedophile Island. No trips on the Lolita Express, by the way. This time, if it was indeed an Israeli operation, it might prove difficult to cover up the story since the pedophile aspect of it has unleashed considerable public anger from all across the political spectrum. Senator Chuck Schumer, self-described as Israel's protector in the Senate, is loudly calling and called for the resignation of Acosta, which has now occurred. He just might change his tune if it turns out that Israel is a major part of the story. One will only know, one will only see. My concern is whenever something big is about to happen, a false flag happens, something to divert your attention. Notice how Iran all of a sudden has been, that has been beyond simmering for years. Now it's starting to boil. Could it be that boiling is related to the fact that 2,000 pages of documents as determined by a court are going to be released on Epstein and the people around him? Could be. Heads up, folks. Bottom line, many people have been very upset with me about saying that Epstein is a big deal, that this could well bring down hundreds, if not several thousand people. I stand by that prediction. I believe it's huge. I believe it will open up an incredible can of worms that will never be able to be closed again. It will expose people of both political parties, of which there's really one, the Republicrats. It will expose business leaders. It will expose leaders on Wall Street. It will expose leaders in Hollywood and the media. It's not a swamp. It's a septic tank. And it's in the process of being opened. Hold your nose. It's going to get really bad. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to thank you for your time. Please join us every Sunday, 2 to 5 Eastern. Stream it live. It's free. Hit the listen button, davejanda.com. Join us. Join us on Wham Radio, whamradio.com. 24/7. Great content. In addition, join us at davejanda.com. The free side, the public side. But I hope you'll become a subscriber. It supports what we do on this YouTube platform. It supports all our other efforts. 30 cents a day, $9 a month. Sign up for a month. If you don't like it, get rid of it. Not sure why, because the information analysis guess you'll never get in the bought-off lamestream fake media. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thank you for your time today.